Greetings all, this is Nick from Those Hairy Gamers. Today we're starting a new series on the channel. This is Reviewing Your Lists. Yes, a little while ago I had a request to start these videos where I take X-Wing lists submitted by you guys and review them, basically. So about a week ago I made a video on the fundamentals of list building, at least my fundamentals of list building and how I approach building lists in X-Wing. Also in that video I made an appeal for you guys to send in your lists so I could review them. Now, when I made that video I thought, yeah, I'll get a small handful of videos, this will be good. And then I can do them the next week and get another handful and do them on and on and on. But the response I got to that video was absolutely massive. I got so many submissions. I'm so grateful for this, guys. You guys obviously really want to see this on my channel, and that's awesome. So I'm going to heavily prioritize these videos. This is now going to be a big centerpiece of the channel. I'll endeavor to do one of these every week. I can't guarantee that'll always be the case. I do work full time as well as manage this YouTube channel, but I will do my best. And on that note, please submit more of your list, guys. I'm really having a good time going through all these. What I'm going to do in these videos is I'm going to group these together. We're not going to just do one list of video. We're going to do a small handful. We're going to group them in terms of list archetypes. So that way I can talk about the archetype as a whole, for example, Palpaces, and look at the different lists you guys have made and kind of relate it back to that archetype and kind of review their strengths and weaknesses from that point of view. Today, we're going to take a look at the new Vaksai title for the Kihraxz and look at some multi-Kihraxz fighter lists. For those of you who don't know, the Vaksai title is a new title coming for the Kihraxz fighter, which allows it to take 3 different modifications and reduces the cost of all of its upgrades by 1 point. During the week, I had a couple of different users submit lists that use this title. The first was from Farmer GM1, and indeed, this was the first person to comment on the video, and as such, I promised I would do this list first in a video. This is Talons Marauders. We have 2 Cartel Marauders in their Kihraxz fighters with assault missiles, glitter stim, engine upgrades, auto thrusters, vectored thrusters, and the Vaksai title for 30 points each. And we have Taliban Cobra with push the limits, assault missiles, glitter stim, engine upgrades, auto thrusters, vectored thrusters, and the Vaksai title for 40 points. So first of all, I want to say I like a lot of stuff that's going on with these lists. I think there are some cool symbioses going on. But Farmer GM1, I have to be critical here because I feel that you may have fallen for a bit of a trap for the newer players. It's a very common temptation to want to overstack your ships with a lot of upgrades and subsequently a lot of points. And I feel like that's what's happened here. Overall, in X-Wing, ships, pilots, whatever, tend to gravitate to a preferred squad point total. If you go dramatically over that total, the ship becomes a bit overly bloated and you will suffer as a consequence because it's really worth more than what it's doing on the table. I feel like, for example, the generic Kihraxz fighters tend to gravitate towards the 25 point mark with the Vaksai title, and Taliban Cobra wants to gravitate towards sort of the mid-30s, say 34, 35. With this list here, you've got a couple of 30-point Cartel Marauders and a 40-point Taliban Cobra. I feel very strongly that this is just too much on both of these different pilots. And for that reason, I would consider making a few cuts on these upgrades. The issue is once you do that, you're then going to be left with a massive initiative bid. And for that reason, I'd consider actually trading out one of these ships. For example, if you made the Cartel Marauders cheaper, you could then switch out, say, Taliban Cobra for something like Captain Nim, or something that cost around the 45 to 50 point mark and was comfortable at that point range. I don't feel like Taliban Cobra is comfortable at 40 points, but something like Captain Nim would be, for example. Just going through what you've put on these ships, let's take a look at the Cartel Marauder first. We have assault missiles and glitter stim. Now, off the bat, I want to say I like that synergy. That's really cool. Ordnance and glitter stim are always very powerful. It perhaps is a little bit too much to stack on this ship, but for a total of 5 points with the Vaksai title, this is doing a lot of work for you and could be quite cool. I would suggest that you consider maybe some other ordnance like the cluster missiles or even the cruise missiles. The cruise missile isn't ideal on the Kihraxz, but at a 3 point cost, or rather a 2 point cost with the Vaksai title, it's very competitive. Cruise missiles and glitter stim only cost you 3 points on this ship, and that isn't something to turn your nose up at. In the modification slots, you put engine upgrades, auto thrusters, and vectored thrusters. Now this is something I just can't get behind. It's something I actually talked about in the very first video I made in this channel. The temptation with the Kihraxz fighter, now that it has all these modification slots, is that we go for these 3 upgrades because suddenly we have an awesome pool of actions, we have auto thrusters, so we're getting the benefits from that, and that's really cool. But my argument against that is the problem is, on the Scum faction, we already have a ship that has the boost and has the barrel roll and can take auto thrusters and is the same point buy-in as a Kihraxz fighter, and that is the Protectorate Starfighter. If you're going to take a Cartel Marauder with engine upgrades, auto thrusters and vectored thrusters, you're better off actually just taking a Zealous Recruit with auto thrusters. There are a lot of upsides to just taking the Protectorate Starfighter, like the dial's much better, it has 3 agility rather than the Kihraxz's 2 agility. Yeah, it doesn't have the shield and it doesn't have the illicit slot, but overall, those upsides on the Kihraxz just aren't enough to overcome this whole idea. The Protectorate Starfighter is doing what you want these Kihraxz fighters to do, but better with these modification slots, and for that reason, I would not recommend engine, auto and vectored on any Kihraxz. We have things like munitions failsafe, guidance chips, pulse ray shield. You could take, say, vectored thrusters. I even think the engine upgrade and auto thrusters is a powerful combo, but 4 points onto a Cartel Marauder is just a bit too much, so I wouldn't do that. Honestly, I would just take vectored thrusters, guidance chips, and munitions failsafe for a grand total of 1 single point with the Vaksai title. That's very, very powerful. Munitions failsafe is pretty much a useless modification, except in this case. It's almost never going to work, but it's nice insurance to have, and it's totally free, which is awesome. Guidance chips, of course, you have ordnance, you want guidance chips. It's going to help you, especially with these low PS guys. Even though you get no point reduction off Vaksai, this is still a very powerful modification. And vectored thrusters is just cool. It's nice to have one of these repositioning abilities, like the boost or the barrel roll, and with vectored thrusters, you're getting it for just 1 point, and that's really cool. I don't love engine upgrades on these guys because of how expensive it is. It's not the kind of pilot you want to be spending a whole heap of points on. So if you consider using those modifications and keeping the assault missile on glitter stim, you're actually bringing the total squad point of the ship down to 26 points. And I think 26 is a much, much better place for this ship to be sitting. I know 4 points might not seem like a lot, but trust me, in the game of X-Wing, points is everything. I think it's also worth noting that internally these upgrades work together a lot better. If you have assault missiles on this ship, you want to be taking target locks, and that reduces your opportunities to use the boost or the barrel roll that you've spent all these points on. Let's move on to Taliban Cobra. Now this is a very interesting set of upgrades. You have, right off the bat, my biggest criticism is, sure, you have assault missiles and glitter stim, again, a very powerful combo, but we also have push the limits, and that's a little bit awkward because glitter stim is going to net you a stress token every time you pop it, and that's going to make it harder to use push the limits. Indeed, you could theoretically in one turn use push the limits and glitter stim together, and then your ship has 2 stress tokens. I'm a bit hesitant with push the limits overall in the Kihraxz fighter simply because there isn't much green on the dial. It's not going to capitalize off this upgrade as good as, say, your TIE Interceptors or your Protectorate Starfighters. I won't write it off entirely though. I still think it's a very, very powerful ability. I'm just not sure about it on Taliban Cobra just yet. So we have assault missiles and glitter stim. That gets a thumbs up from me. But again, we have engine, auto, and vectored. Now, there's a lot of choices we have here. I personally would actually consider keeping engine upgraded and auto thrusters. I think having auto thrusters on Taliban Cobra is going to be very, very powerful, and engine upgrades gets you the access to it. Now, engine and autos cost 4 points on Taliban Cobra, and that's okay. Previously, I was talking about the Cartel Marauder, and I said, nope, that's too many points. On Taliban Cobra, that's not so bad. He already physically costs more points, and he's going to be playing a bigger role in your squad. For that reason, I actually don't mind sinking a bit more into him points-wise. I personally wouldn't bother with vectored thrusters simply because it has the whole issue of Taliban Cobra doesn't want to try and be Fen Rao. We already have Fen Rao. He's cheaper and better at doing this whole thing. So I'd actually put something like Pulse Ray Shield on Taliban Cobra, simply because it gives his movement dial a bit more versatility. Kihraxz fighters don't have the 1 straight, and the Pulse Ray Shield is a bit of a cheeky way of getting the 1 straight into their game. And it also gives Taliban Cobra regen. Regen is a very, very, very powerful thing in X-Wing. Sure, it's only 1 shield that he can regen, but alongside engine upgrade and auto thrusters, we already have great positioning and great defensive capabilities with Taliban Cobra. And this to me makes a whole lot more sense. I feel like a bit of a mistake you've made with this list is you've spent a lot of points into making these ships really powerful and aggressive, but nothing to make them really good and defensive, and that's why I'd be keen to put Pulse Ray Shield in this. Engine upgrades with Taliban Cobra's ability is fantastic. He cares so much about range. Engine upgrades will push you into range 1 on offense or push you into range 3 on defense, and that is everything that Taliban Cobra is about. So yes, Farmer GM1, I like what you're doing with the assault missiles and Glitterstim, but I feel overall that these ships are all a bit too pushed points-wise, and I think ultimately you'll do better if you just scale them back a bit. I'll also say that one of the original points I made in the video talking about the fundamentals of list building is, consider the overall frames of your build. This build has 3 Kihraxz fighters, and that honestly to me doesn't feel that competitive. 3 is not the ideal amount of these guys you want on the field. I just feel like unless there's really powerful symbiosis going on, they're just not going to be tanky enough, they're not going to last long enough in the battlefield to really do their job. And from that point of view, I consider scaling back their points, maybe thinking about adding in a different ship and really capitalizing on what these Kihraxz fighters are trying to do. Now on that point of 3 Kihraxz fighters, I want to move on to this next list by Hawktopus9. This is a list that actually involves 4 generic Kihraxz fighters. And just from the point of view of the raw frames of a list, I feel like this is a much more competitive way of using the Kihraxz fighters. 4 feels immensely better than 3. You go from 15 overall hit points in your squad to 20, and 20 is a great threshold to aim for. Right, all 4 Kihraxz fighters in Hawktopus9's list are Black Sun Aces. This is the generic Kihraxz fighter pilot with an EPT slot. This is equipped with the Vaksai title, a Tani Mindlink, X-23 S-thread tracers, inertial dampeners, pulse ray shield, vectored thrusters, and munitions failsafe. Now, this is very interesting. First of all, off the bat, I want to say I feel like guidance chips is a better option than munitions failsafe. It's very tempting to take munitions failsafe because it's a point and you're reducing it to 0, and that feels like better value than taking guidance chips, but I feel like guidance chips just overall, even if you're just going to use it with the XX23 S-thread tracers, is going to net you faster results. The problem with munitions failsafe is, yes, it means you keep the card even if you miss the attack, but you've still lost an attack, and that doesn't feel strong. With guidance chips, you're actually improving the odds of the S-thread tracers hitting, and that, in my opinion, is actually just a bit more powerful than munitions failsafe. Having said that, apart from that one little point, I really love this list. With the low point cost, you've made these Kihraxz fighters go nice and low to the ground, and they've snuck in at 25 points, which in my opinion is the golden point to aim for with these ships. And that means you can squeeze 4 of them in the list, and 4 of them is a good competitive amount, I feel. And that's really a great way to capitalize on the Vaksai title. A Tiny Mindlink in particular, for free, is fantastic. Now, there is always the risk that by the time Guns for Hire releases, we may get a Tiny Mindlink nerf. That there is rumours about that happening, that may be on the horizon. I'm not going to comment until we know anything for sure, but that is a factor to think about when looking at this list. So from that point of view, you might switch it out, and that's okay, frankly. I think there are good options you can take instead of this. In my opinion, probably Crackshot's the best way to go with this. We know from past experience that Crackshot en masse is a great upgrade and can do a lot in a swarm. I also feel like you've made really good use of the slots that help you reposition your ship. We have inertial dampeners, great, we can do a full stop if we ever need to. That can really help in a bad situation. We have pulse ray shield, so we can do the one forward. We also have the regen off the back of that, that's cool, I like that. And we also have vectored thrusters, which is really cool. Having pilot skill 5 isn't the best thing in the game. Obviously, it's not going to be outflying the PS9 aces, but as a 4-of, as generics, pilot skill 5 is great, and having repositioning abilities with that is going to help a lot. If you happen to come across, say, triple Skurgs or triple Scouts, this is great. You're going to be flying after all of those ships, and you're going to be really happy that you took these repositioning abilities. I also want to add that I've never been a big fan of Pulse Ray Shield overall, but I love the idea of having it on 4 ships, because the biggest issue I have with it is when you use it on one ship, it telegraphs exactly where that ship's going to go. But if you're flying ships in formation and you do it on all 4 ships, yeah, your opponent's going to know where they're going to end up the next turn. However, there's also the added benefit of those ships can cover each other quite well. Your opponent isn't just going to want to dive right at it if it's going to catch him in all 4 of those firing arcs. That's not good for your opponent. So unless they do some really good flying and get behind all 4 ships, I think it actually makes Pulse Ray Shield way more powerful, which is quite cool. I'm really glad that I had both of these lists to actually compare, because ultimately this is a common thing that occurs with X-Wing. We can either take a certain number of a ship with a lighter build, or a smaller number of a ship with more heavy builds. And that's what we're seeing here with Hawktopus 9 and Farmer GM1's lists. And I feel like the reason I'm gravitating toward Hawktopus 9's list is because I feel like these upgrades are more justified. It's less bloaty overall. Now, that's not to say there aren't examples of lists that can benefit of reducing the amount of ships and increasing the amount of points put on that ship. But for the Kihraxz fighter, I feel like with the generics, you want to aim for 25 points. It just feels right to me. And I hope with the justification I've used today, you guys can understand where I'm coming from on that. So thank you very much to Farmer GM1 and Hawktopus 9 for setting in those lists. I myself am very, very excited for the Kihraxz fighter fix. I think the Vaksai tile is going to offer a lot for the ship. And if you guys in the comment section have any other ideas for the Vaksai title, let me know in the comments and we can have a look at those at a later date. And if you have any other X-Wing lists you want me to review, put those in the comments. I will save them for later and put them in a video. Anyway guys, thanks for watching, like and subscribe, and I will catch you later.